The opinions expressed on the Custody Queen Show are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for personal, professional legal advice. The persons discussed are fictional and not based on actual clients.
Thought it was love, had kids in between. You can count on us, we're the Custody Queens. Yeah, you can count on us, we're the Custody Queens.
Good morning, everybody. This is Kristen Holstrom, and I am with Sam McBride, and we are the Custody Queens. And this morning, we have a very special show for you. We have David Rodriguez from Amazing Heart Ministries, and it is a show that is incredibly special to Sam and I, and we hope that everybody enjoys it.
So first off, David, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to have you share your story. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. My mother and father were world champion boxers, kickboxers. My mother's inducted into the Hall of Fame posthumously.
Wow.
That is incredible.
Absolutely. Lily Urquidez Rodriguez. So I idolized them for the people they were.
Did you box growing up?
I did some boxing, some karate. They were also black belts.
Oh, wow.
You're right.
So you had a tough household.
Yes, absolutely. So very disciplined, very strict, but they were constantly gone. And so I had to raise myself. And in raising myself, I was immediately drawn towards the gangs. Around 14, I started to get into the gang life. My mother and father had no clue whatsoever. I'd hide my clothes on the side of the house, put them back on, my gang clothes, and go right back out into the streets. Around age 16, that's when my life just took a different path. My parents were in Japan fighting, and I went on a 6-week crime spree. After 6 weeks, I was arrested on 21 felonies. And
oh, wow.
My parents were shocked. They couldn't believe it. I went from baseball to being a criminal, and they were just shocked that somebody, a good kid like myself, could go from being a good kid to the extreme. And before you know it, at age 16, I was tried as an adult up at the Sylmar Juvenile Hall. And after a week, they had me on the county jail bus with the adults and in the LA County Jail. And that's the way it was back in 1982.
Wow, that must have been quite a shock too.
Makes you grow up real quick.
I was with juveniles, and now I'm with adults at the time. And I quickly determined that I was going to fall deeper into the gangs. That was the way to survive in jail, is to get deeper into the gangs. I did just that. Eventually, I was tried as an adult, or found guilty, and sent to life in prison as a juvenile. And
wow.
As a juvenile. And I was sent up to Old Folsom State Prison. And I remember just walking through this castle in the front. It looks like a castle. I just walked right through it. And the guards said, this is it. This is home for the rest of your life. And I said, okay, this is it. I'm going to make the best of it.
And do you think you processed that at that time?
No, my mind couldn't even understand what was ahead of me.
Sure.
I couldn't even begin to understand. I just knew that in order to survive in prison, I had to ramp up the violence. I had to become like the gang members in prison. And
Can I ask you what you were convicted of?
Sure. I was convicted of murder, 7 attempted murders, and a host of other felonies. I've always pled innocent to the murder, but they didn't want to hear it because the MO fit.
The motive fit.
The motive fit. So.
You said you pled not guilty.
I pled not guilty to that, but I was still found guilty.
Did you do a plea deal, or did you go through trial?
I did. Yeah, in my best interest, I took a plea deal and received life, 15 to life plus 29 years. And I was immediately sent to Old Folsom State Prison.
Which, isn't that one of like the most dangerous?
That was the most dangerous at the time.
Wow.
Right.
I think that's where Scott Peterson is, right?
He's in San Quentin death row. Yes. But they're very similar.
Very similar, right?
Similar.
I've watched. I'm very curious about a lot of stuff you're talking about, and I've watched a lot of documentaries on it.
It was there that I knew that I had to draw closer to the gangs. I did, and I wanted to make my mark there in the prison. So when it came my time, they said, okay, we need somebody to assault a northern gang member. We were southern gang members. So I said yes. And that's when I committed murder in prison. That was my first murder. And I moved up quickly within the gang ranks. And eventually they sent me to another Supermax prison. And then eventually they opened up Pelican Bay State Prison, where I remained in solitary confinement for 25 years straight.
Wow.
Right. And I saw so many people just losing their mind. It was too much.
Can you explain for us a little bit about what solitary confinement really is?
Solitary confinement is prison within a prison, where you're in a cell by yourself, no windows. You have no contact with other inmates or with guards. They open up your cell gate, they open up the concrete yard, which is 12 by 28. And you go into that yard for an hour, and then they open up the gates, you go right back to your cell. Then they open it up again, you go to the shower and back. So you never have contact with other humans. This is it. This is life for decades and decades.
For 25 years.
For 25 years. And so many people were just starting to lose it back there. Even the gang members started to turn on each other. And I realized that if I was going to survive, I had to really find something that would take my mind to somewhere else. So that was reading. I read and exercise. And I had to get deeper into it. So that's what really was my saving grace, was reading.
When did you start reading?
5 to 10 years of being within solitary confinement. At the first 5 or 10 years, I was still heavily gang oriented, and I thought, okay,
yeah,
if these cell gates open, and they did at times, we had to go to war with each other. So 1 minute we're playing chess with each other, we're sharing food with each other, the next minute we're at war with each other. It's just a strange environment. We figured we might as well live at peace with each other as long as the gates were closed. But once they opened, the agreement was, we'll attack each other, we'll go to war.
Wow. And so what happened? You started reading books and started deciding that you wanted to change around. How difficult that must be when you're already in that situation.
Absolutely. My change came when my brother was murdered through gang violence. He took on the same gang name, same gang, but he was murdered one day.
And was he in prison as well?
On the streets. He was on the streets. His girlfriend was teaching him how to drive stick shift. And it was 1 a.m, and he couldn't get the car out of gear. So they came in and they shot several times. One of the bullets struck his heart, killing him almost immediately. And my mother and father were called to the hospital to identify his body. So when my mother called me to let me know that my brother was murdered, she told me that she went to the hospital and she walked down a corridor with my father, and she said she saw a door slightly open. She could see his feet. She said she collapsed and she started screaming, "I know those feet. I gave birth to those feet." And that is what really began to reawaken my conscience. And I started to connect what I had done in prison to somebody else's son with what was done to my brother. And I was able to really empathize with the victims. And I said, my God, what did I do? What did I do? I started to awaken, and I was just, it was something that was so difficult for me to really take in, that I had done to somebody else what was done to my brother. Because I remember holding my brother when he was brought home from the hospital, and I remember kissing his nose, and just a beautiful little baby.
And so how did you manage to then, once you start reading and start turning your life around, how did you actually logistically manage to get out from solitary confinement, from being in a gang? How did you do that?
One of the first things I did was say to myself, even if I have to spend the rest of my life in prison, I don't want to be the same person. I don't want to be the same person that contributed to killing my own brother. You know, I idolized and glorified gangs, and that was the very thing that destroyed my brother's life. And I saw it took the laughter from my mother and father's face. Their eyes no longer lit up with laughter and smile. They almost divorced. It almost separated my family, and I seen what that action does to a family. And I realized that I didn't want to be a part of it. So the first thing I did was say to the gang members, I'm finished. My name is David now. I'm no longer going by my gang name. And they said, do you understand what that means? I said, yeah, absolutely. They said, you're on your own feet now, and don't expect any help from us, and you know what will happen to you eventually.
Because you don't have protection.
Right. And I said, I'm willing to stand on my own feet. I can do it. And that was through my faith. My faith would be my saving grace, what would keep me going forward and saying, you know what, I can do this apart from the gang. Because really, a gang becomes a heavy crutch for so many of us. We rely on it. It's like a drug. We rely on it. And now we have to destroy that personality, that image that we built of ourselves, and we have to find out who we are now. What do I really believe? What do I really think? Where am I going in my life? Who am I? And that was my mission, to find out who I was.
And so did you still remain in solitary confinement?
Yes, absolutely. Because for them, in the prison guards, they say, you either snitch, parole, or die. And those were not an option for me. Right. So that wasn't an option. So I remained there in the SHU for a long time to come. And then every time my cell gate opened up, they say parole board. And I was saying, I'm not going. And they say, why? Because I said, because I didn't commit the murder. I'm not guilty of that murder from the streets. And they said, okay. So for 23 years, when I was finally eligible for parole, I just refused to go.
Wow.
And they said, you're going to die here then. I said, I understand. I'm willing to. But that was something I can accept, because I knew that I had committed crimes. I had hurt so many people, and I realized that I deserved prison. There's no way around that. I deserved to be where I was. I was accepting of the consequences. And so the rest I had to leave in God's hands and say, okay, whatever happens, happens, but I'm not going to the parole board. And then one day, my dad came to see me. He said, I know, man. His name's Scott Budnick. He's the producer for the Hangover movies, Hangover 1, 2, and 3. He works in this line of gang prevention and intervention as well. He goes, he knows a lady named Heidi Romo. She's a professor at UCLA or USC. She's willing to take her case. I said, really? And so she came to visit me, and she said, David, I read your transcripts, and I believe that you didn't commit the murder. I believe you wholeheartedly. So I'm going to take your case, and I'm going to be with you to the very end.
And you had to take the plea because it was in your best interest.
In my best interest.
Yeah, and he was 16. I mean, I can't imagine. Most adults don't understand what they're
pleading to.
But what they're pleading to and what the consequences, or what you're by silencing, admitting to, basically.
Absolutely. So she took my case, and I went to the parole board, and they gave me a 5-year denial. You give somebody a 5-year denial when they assaulted somebody recently, a recent assault. So they gave me a 5-year denial, and I was just in shock that they had done so, because I got into college. I did everything that they asked me to do, all the self-help groups and everything. And
you hadn't committed any further crimes, and I'm assuming a very long time.
No, I hadn't had any infractions in a few decades.
Wow.
Yes. They said only because you were in solitary confinement that you didn't.
That's why you didn't commit any infractions.
That was their position.
That was their position. And but I was eventually sent to general population, and that just disproved everything they had said, because there I had no infractions whatsoever.
Did you face any of the fallout from leaving the gang when you went back to Gen Pop?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A lot of threats, because for them, moving away from the gang is considered cowardly. You're either in or you're out. There's no middle ground. There's no walking away without some kind of consequences.
There's no friendly retirement.
No friendly retirement. My dad would always say, what do you get, a gold watch when you retire?
Yeah.
And he said, no, these guys who retire get a knife to the neck.
Right.
That's their retirement.
So how do you believe that you avoided that?
By
Your
my
faith.
faith.
Yeah.
By my faith. That's what took me through, my faith. I still, to this day, I still have my guard up, but I have to live life. I can't worry about it.
And so when you said that Heidi Romero
Heidi
took
Romo,
your case, what happened?
well, she took my case, and then she said one day, after I received the 5-year denial, she said, David, we have just one last option. That's to file an appeal to the governor. And I said, you do that, and I'll pray. She said, you have to because I'm Buddhist. And I said, okay, then you do it. She did it, and a year and a half later, the governor granted it. And they sent me back to the parole board. And after 5.5 hours of intense questioning, they found me suitable. They said, you no longer pose a threat to society. And they said, and the reason we're going to find you suitable today is because you pled guilty to the murder in prison. That's the part that I left out. They only knew that I had committed a murder in prison because I came after.
Because you told them.
I confessed to it 16 years later. I confessed to it. That was part of my conscience reawakening, and knowing that I had to be responsible. If I was going to ever be totally human again, I had to take all these skeletons out of my closet and be transparent before people and say, okay, this is what I've done. And I made amends. I made amends with everybody that had harmed, including confessing to the murder. And the parole board officer said, because you confessed to that murder, I believe that you didn't commit that murder from the streets.
That shows a lot about your character, because if you admitted to one murder, you would have likely admitted to the other,
yes.
or denied them both. But it shows a lot about who you are, or at that phase of your life.
And for that reason, they found me suitable after 37 years incarcerated. 37 years.
So how was it when you got out? Tell me about the big day.
Yes, my wife came to pick me up.
Now, did you meet your wife in prison?
No, we've known each other since we were 13.
Oh, I love that.
It's the thing when the judge hit the gavel and he said life, she went her way naturally and I went my way. But eventually, destiny would bring us back together.
Did she visit you in prison?
Yes, every week. And it was shocking.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yes, every week she was there. She would go every 8 weeks to Pelican Bay. And then when I got closer to home, she would come every week to see me.
Okay, so let's go back to your big day. You get out.
I got out and I said to her, the first thing I said to her was, we better leave before they change their mind.
I bet.
So we left, we went home, and I just had to adjust to everything. That part of my mind that says I want to make decisions is shut off. The minute we're arrested, that part of our mind shuts off because every decision is made for us in prison. So now I had to turn that part back on. Right. And I had to make a lot of decisions. It was overwhelming at first.
Oh, I bet. The anxiety,
right. Anxiety, all of it. I had to learn how to drive. I had to learn to do everything. I would make my right turns and go up on the curb, and I said, no, make them wider. And I had to learn how to use computer, everything from the beginning, like a baby, having to learn how to do everything.
Did you have any of those temptations from the gang life when you got out? Were they around you, or?
Well, I work for gang prevention intervention, so I work with kids
going through similar
circumstances. But I had no desire to go back. I was out and I didn't look back. I'm so grateful for my freedom.
Yeah.
And
how did you get involved in the gang prevention?
Well, my brother Sonny was murdered, and 3 years later, my dad changed the course. He's a commentator. He still is a commentator for Muay Thai boxing, and but he changed his career, and he went right into creating this foundation, nonprofit organization for kids who are in school, out of school, who are running the streets in the gangs.
And how long have you been doing that?
For about maybe a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to feel really rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going into the court and working with kids that are going through similar circumstances and being able to guide them through it and letting them know this is not the end. You will come home one day. It may be a long time before you come home, but use your time wisely in there. Don't throw it away.
Yeah, and I mean, it just seems like you would be such an incredible mentor for someone that is going through something like that, because you have to feel really alone in that situation. It sounds like you really felt forced into a sort of lifestyle that sweeps you up.
It does. It just sweeps us up. And, thankfully, the United States Supreme Court ruled that prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until age 25. So these are the science and the laws that changed that allowed me to come home again.
Wow.
I mean, I think back at decisions that I made when I was 16, and I didn't get into any real serious trouble, but just looking back at, being 25 is still young. You're a young adult, but like being able to process things as an adult, going through life experiences versus someone that young, you have no clue what you're agreeing to, what you're doing, what the consequences are, what the consequences of those consequences are. You said something very early on. You said that your parents were never there. And that struck home with me because I think that's an issue a lot in the world that we live in today. I was very lucky. I had my dad. I still work with my dad, but he was home every night, and my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. There was 4 of us, and she was always home. They kept us in many sports and kept us busy for that exact reason. But I see in so many of the cases that we take, and in our world with social media, and just everything that goes on, and children, they're exposed to so much at such an early age, and it really I get very concerned for those kids when their parents, they may travel for work too much, or, they're left alone for 3-4 hours every day after school, or there's just so many things that I worry about. And my biggest thing is I try to teach my clients and talk about with my fellow friends and colleagues is that being present is the absolute best thing you can do as a parent.
It really is. More
than anything else.
I'm out there in the streets with these kids all the time, and I'm starting to realize that a lot of these kids are being swept up into sex trafficking.
I was just going to say that's like a very real concern for me as a parent. It freaks me out.
I had 2 clients, a 14 and 16-year-old, and they ran away. Within a week, their posters came up. A poster means that those who are operating the sex trafficking will put their picture and their age and say, this is who they are, or they're available, do you want them? So their posters came up, LAPD saw it, and they told me their posters are already up, they're already involved in sex trafficking. And I just thought back to the time when I went to visit the kids. They look like babies. They're not even close to looking like women, and yet that's the lifestyle that they were swept off into. And I just realized that it's growing bigger and bigger. It's not so much the drugs, that's an epidemic, or the gang violence, it's sex trafficking.
Yeah, it's something that it gives me debilitating anxiety of just, because you want your children to be able to try new things and as they get older to give them a little bit more responsibility, but it's still a very fine line of protecting, your kids. And kids are so innocent for the most part. They don't, I have a 9-year-old little girl, and there was an incident where her and I were getting our nails done, and I had noticed somebody walking past us a few times, and I noticed he waited for us to get done, and my daughter says, "Mom, why did you pick me up?" And because I said, "Wrap your arms around me really tight." And, I didn't want to share what I was concerned with, but it was very clear to me that I had to be very careful, but it's all around us, and it's not something that is going to go away, I think. And anytime I deal with a client, a friend that just wants to talk about life, it's the biggest thing I say is presence, presence, presence. If you can work from home a couple days a week and be there when your kids get home from school, use your village, use your resources, but keeping your eyes on your children is the most important. Being involved in their sports, sometimes maybe too involved, I'm speaking from personal experience, but really just being present. Do you think that your life would have been different if your parents were home more?
Absolutely. It would have been completely different. I would have had some guidance in my life, somebody to say to me, this is the direction you should go into. And I try not to blame them, but I know that their presence would have made a huge difference in my life. And the kids that I work with, their parents are working 2 and sometimes even 3 jobs. So they're not home, and the kids are just left to their own imagination. And they're using young boy gang members, to draw on these young girls who who don't even understand what they're being drawn into. Before you know it, they're getting into the sex trafficking, and a lot of kids. That's an epidemic. That's a huge thing out there in the San Fernando Valley.
And it doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion. It's always
underreported.
Yeah, we hear, you hear about every now and then the big stuff, and I'll start going down rabbit holes when I start watching videos and reading articles, because it's something really that if I think about it too much, it will keep me up for, because you want to protect these little humans as much as you can, but sometimes things are out of your control. But I don't feel like it's something that gets enough attention and support and resources from all the different government agencies.
Absolutely. I thought about that myself. Why doesn't LAPD bring it to the forefront? That still just troubles me that they're not bringing it to the forefront.
I think there should be a lot more education about it, a lot more attention so people can know what to look for, what are the signs, what are the patterns, what are the occurrences. But no, I agree with you. And David, I want to thank you from the bottom of Sam and I's hearts for sharing the story. I know it's not easy. I'm very proud of what you're doing with the Amazing Heart Ministries. I think it's super important for everyone to have faith, whatever that looks like to each individual, whatever that truly means is inside that person. But I think it's very important to believe in something bigger than ourselves. And your story is very touching. I love the accountability. I love the transformation. I love the journey that you and your soul went through. I can't even imagine what 37 years would be like.
And if people want to help in any way and get a hold of you and your nonprofit, is there a number or website or something they can get in touch with?
Yes, at amazingheartministries.com.
Okay.
And we will post that information in the link below so that way you can find it. There's probably opportunities, obviously, for donations or for volunteer. I know that Sam and I would love to maybe volunteer a day if there's something that we could,
we would love to
come. We would love to
Yes,
come out for a day.
yes.
That's something that's important to both of us in community outreach, because we are all in this together. And I think that the more children that are around adults and supervised and not left to the imagination, and I think social media has a big part of that these days. But something I preach on every show, people, is presence, presence, presence. And I would much rather my clients, whoever I'm having this conversation, I would much rather those parents be over-involved than under-involved. It's probably a fine line, but I truly believe that all kids need is our presence. But thank you so much, David. This was a very special show to us. It was something that touched me on so many different levels.
Yeah, and I think it's really courageous for you to share your story. And I think it's incredible that you've really taken your life and turned it around. I mean, it's incredible. I have a lot of respect for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And if you are looking to be a part of Amazing Heart Ministries and to donate or be part of something, please reach out. We will provide the contact information below. If you need more information, please call the Custody Queens at 1-800-419-7772. That is 1-800-419-7772. I know that Sam and I are going to make it a priority to see if we can help in some way in the next few months, because I think that's something really important for community to come together and be part of. And, we had a great show, but we have to end it with my favorite saying. And remember, let love rule.